All right, and it looks like we are live. So welcome, Jun.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on the live stream.
Yeah, no, this is great to have you here, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk. So we're actually here live from IndieBio headquarters in San Francisco. If you can see in the background, they've got a pretty beautiful setup here.
Mural with a bio arm touching a robot arm. It's hard to see.
And Jun was kind enough to offer to take some questions about IndieBio, the biotech startup ecosystem in general, and pretty much anything biotech related. So we'll kick off. We had some audience questions around maybe mostly 4 categories. So therapeutic startups, since a lot of what biotech startup school is about is therapeutics, and IndieBio is doing some very interesting things in that space. And then we'll talk about just general advice from Jun and IndieBio to people who are scientists and want to be entrepreneurs. Then we'll talk about some exciting technology that's emerging and kind of where that could go in the next few years, and then wrap up with some information about IndieBio's programs as well. But to kick off, Jun, do you want to just give a quick intro on yourself?
Yeah, and maybe I can start with the intro to IndieBio too for context as well. So my name is Jun Axup. I did a PhD in chemical biology from Scripps Research Institute. And then after that, or actually during that, I got really interested in entrepreneurship. And at the time, I was mostly influenced by entrepreneurship in more the app world. And my friends were kind of in that space because biotech entrepreneurship didn't really exist. From that, kind of had that in the back of my mind, went on and worked at several companies in the Bay Area, including Synthigo, Sutro Biopharma, and then ended up co-founding a company called My Eye Diagnostics that actually went through IndieBio. So that's how I ended up getting connected with IndieBio as a trainee myself, and kind of learning the ropes of entrepreneurship. And then after that, ended up joining IndieBio as staff and kind of realizing that, helping entrepreneurship and kind of pulling the mission of getting more scientists to become entrepreneurs was what I was passionate about. And so that's what IndieBio does. Our general theme is to help scientists become entrepreneurs. Most of our companies are formed by PhD scientists. They are first-time founders, and they're oftentimes even working on the PhD project that they were working on, trying to transition that into a business. And so, we try to create the structure where it's, extremely friendly, very, very supportive. It's a whole network of these folks all trying to learn entrepreneurship together. So we kind of think of it as like, doing a PhD is really, really hard. But there's a lot of structure. There's a lot of support. You have your PIs, you have your peers, you have committee members. Well, why don't we form something like that for entrepreneurship? So in essence, like IndieBio is kind of like a class. It's kind of it's a 4-month embedded kind of coursework heavy kind of environment, but you are in among peers, working on things together, working on your own things, of course, and really trying to de-risk your science, de-risk your business, and figuring out your business model, figuring out product market fit. But then we also really focus on leadership. How do you grow a team? How do you interact with your co-founders? Communication, and then, of course, the fundraising aspect that kind of wraps it all together to try to get your company to that next level.
And you funded how many companies so far?
Right now, 116.
Okay.
Yeah, in the last 5 years that we've been around. So we do 2 cohorts a year. They're 4 months each, and we take 2 months off to kind of reset and bring the new cohort in.
Okay, and that's probably the biggest accelerator in biotech in the world, I'd imagine.
It is, yeah. And we're also one of the first that is accelerator that's devoted specifically to life sciences.
Right, awesome. And you've been at IndieBio since almost the beginning, is that right?
Yeah, I've been here since batch 4,
Okay.
And then plus being a part of IndieBio through batch 2, being a trainee within IndieBio. It's been about 3.5 years now.
Okay, awesome. Very grateful to have you here. And if there's any questions from the audience, go ahead and you can submit them in the chat. Also, if there's any issues with the video quality, let us know. Hopefully not. But I'll just go ahead and start off with some of the questions that people submitted in advance. Mm-hmm. And because Biotech Startup School is mostly about therapeutics, wanted to start there. So one of the questions was, at what stage can a therapeutics company apply? So if you have an idea and maybe a provisional patent, is that too early? Or what's enough to get into IndieBio as a therapeutics company?
Yeah. So we do take companies all over the spectrum. We've had companies that literally had a pencil and pen idea, but obviously a lot of expertise and a lot of thought into that idea. And then we've also had companies that licensed out of a university that actually, just this last batch, they submitted a pre-IND. So they were
Wow.
far along that they already had enough mouse data to really submit that application for human trials. So there's definitely a range. We do have a set deal, so we give $250K in funding, in exchange for equity, and that comes with the lab space and a bunch of all the resources in the program. And so it definitely depends on like where the company is at. If the company's taken in more funding originally, then maybe IndieBio doesn't make sense for them. But generally, we'll review companies if they haven't taken money with all kinds of data. But what we have seen, there's definitely a lot of trends in what we have seen is platform technologies are much more attractive than single assets. Because if it's a single asset, essentially you just have one bet, and you are basically going to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars betting on that one experiment, and that's very difficult for investors to get behind unless it's something so compelling that that it's like a sure thing, right? Which of course in pharma is not a sure thing, and everything is has to be validated and go through all the clinical trials. So that's why if you have a platform technology, then now you have multiple shots on goal. You have ways to adapt your target. You have ways to engineer around problems and solve the different problems as you go. So that becomes way more attractive. And so some of the avenues, especially that we've been looking at, are new modalities of delivery. So of course, gene delivery is really hot right now. Cell delivery, T cell, CAR T. We've had macrophages and like other kinds of immune modulatory molecules. We've had exosome companies to deliver therapeutics. So those are all kind of different platforms. We had ones where it's like a peptide therapeutic that breaks protein-protein interactions called Synthex. And actually Maria was
she was on our first panel.
On your first panel, exactly. And their value is not only are they trying to kind of resurge the interest in peptides, but also the fact that they're using an yeast system and directed evolution system, they're able to gene therapy, cell therapy. A lot of it now is to really think about what are the biggest problems in gene therapy and cell therapy, right? Obviously, tons and tons of people around the world are working on this. All the big pharmas are working on this. What is there to be cracked? One example is in gene therapy, a lot of people use AAV vectors, but the problem is if you inject it once, you develop immunity to AAV, and now you cannot get a second dose. And it's likely that even when you got the first dose, your body is actually fighting against it. So the efficacy is actually knocked down a little bit because your immune system is attacking the AAV. A company called Serenity Bio, what they're doing is they're co-injecting with an immune modulatory molecule that basically tells your body that the AAV virus is actually normal. It's like, don't make antibodies against this. So now you're able to basically create a vaccine, anti-vaccine, the opposite. You tolerate your body to AAV, allowing you to then inject multiple doses, to tailor the AAV in a way where you can actually have like a dose response. So for example, that was both a platform because it can be applied to not just AAV, but all kinds of other viruses as well. It can be obviously applied to a lot of different indications, but it was also where they recognized that the limitation for all of gene therapy is this immune system problem. Right. And so now they're going to go fix that in order to make all of gene therapy much better.
Right. So they have identified a technological problem that hinders development of medicines that we know or have pretty high confidence would help patients if you could remove this roadblock. And they're just going in and removing that.
Right. Yeah. And their business model will be a little bit different. It's probably going to be more like co-licensing, right? But that in itself is a very great model to do because there's so many different companies available and all of them might want to work with you, versus taking their own single asset to market.
Right.
So there's a lot of flexibility there. And it's great when you can have a therapeutics companies that has all these different multiple paths available to you.
Right. And one question a lot of people asked was, if you have a platform and there's all these different things you can do with the platform. There's all these different products that you can develop. How do you pick the right thing to focus
Yes, absolutely. So this is definitely a chicken and egg problem, right? Like everyone wants you to have a platform, but everyone also wants you to have an indication. So I think at this stage, that's at such an early stage, having a platform gives you flexibility. But as soon as you like start, raising your Series A and going to B, that's when you really have to show investors like this is the one indication we're going for, or this is the one type of business model we're going for. So whether it be licensing with multiple people or taking one indication yourself. So that is definitely. I think one of the biggest problems in biotech and why biotech is so difficult compared to like software. Software, everyone has access to the same code. Then it's all about how do you code that into a user experience, into a business model, into something that works. In biotech, it becomes the opposite, right? You're oftentimes not thinking about the business model. You're thinking more about what underlying technology do I have. And so you're working with technology, and it's very, very easy to get trapped into over engineering or engineering a problem that doesn't exist. And so that's a lot of what we do at IndieBio too. We do evaluate companies based on the technology, but during the batch, they really need to find what's the best use of that technology. And sometimes, and to try to find that product market fit, right? So there is product market fit in therapeutics as well, absolutely. And especially if you have a platform technology, there you need to find that product market fit where you can actually justify that your technology is really doing the thing that really improves the lives of patients for this specific indication, and why this indication is is unmet, or there's not a lot of good options out there, and how you're actually improving that. And it could be an experience thing. It could be obviously efficacy thing. It could be a safety related thing. So I think with every company, product market fit and adapting your technology and figuring out what that ultimate product is the biggest challenge, especially from this early stage.
So companies can apply to IndieBio with just a technology or a platform that they have an idea of it could be useful. It's this product or this product. And part of what you do at IndieBio is help figure out exactly what's the right first indication to go after, what's the right first product to go after.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so the way we evaluate companies are kind of on 5 pillars. The first is, what is the technology? Why does this technology give you an unfair advantage in the marketplace? What is the product that you're building out of this technology? Technology itself is not a product. So what are you making out of this product? So you can have a platform technology, but what is that first indication? What is that actual drug that you're making? The next is then, what is the business model? So in therapeutics, most people, if they're taking a lead to market, then that means you're taking the lead to market. That's the business model. But again, if you have that platform technology, it's really great that you can have side businesses. You can license out, you can partner with other people, and produce revenue in different ways too. So that's still also something to explore. And then kind of the VC question is, can this provide big returns? For therapeutics, oftentimes that's a yes. But that's not always the case too, right? Depending on what indication you select, if it's an orphan disease versus something more like cancer, and like where the money is coming from there. So, but our rough kind of gauge is, can this problem touch 1 billion people or $1 billion?
Gotcha.
Kind of as the big VC question. And then the fifth question, which almost is the most important question, is this the team to do it? So who are the team members? And we require at least 2 co-founders, usually one on the business side, one on the science side. And we do require them to be here in our lab every single day working together. We just find that time and time again, single founders, there's just so much work to be done. And then not just the work, but also just have the sanity check to be able to like, just, be like, hey, what do you think of this? And like bounce ideas off of someone else is really important in making sure that you're not like over biasing your own ideas. And so, the co-founder thing is very hard. And that's that's always like one of the most difficult things for someone to start out,
Right.
because as scientists, most of us are single contributors doing our own thing. Finding someone else who also shares your vision and passion and want to work together in that cohesive way is very difficult. So I always recommend, if you're thinking about doing a company in the future, even if you're in grad school, like start networking and network with your peers, but also network outside of your immediate group, network with business people. But we also don't necessarily see that our companies are one scientist and one like MBA. Oftentimes we also see our co-founders being two scientists, but one of them decides to be more the business type person who likes engaging people more, finding out, talking to patients, talking to doctors, and kind of developing those kind of relationships.
Gotcha. I think Maria said that they're both scientists as the founding team, and she said she was better at email, so she became the CEO.
Yeah, and that's what I found too. It's like I think for me personally too, like I felt like I wasn't like the deep scientist who like wanted to get at the nitty-gritties of everything.
Yeah.
I was more of the entrepreneurship type where I'm like, okay, give me the basics, and now I want to make something with it.
Right.
I now want to start a company with it, or remix it some way. And so you do see kind of the different profiles in people, and sometimes it matches very well, where one person like really wants to focus on building the science, and someone else wants to present the science and kind of connect that with the world.
Right. So I think there's one more question I had for the therapeutic space.
Yeah,
but there's another question I wanted to just ask to touch on that. And when you've said you evaluate the team, which is obviously a critically important part of the company, and you talked a little bit of the co-founder relationship and the importance of that. But how do you think about the relationship between the team and the technology? Because I know that sort of the classic model in a lot of cases is you'll have a scientist who develops some technology in their lab and then partner with someone else and bring that forward. But then there are also companies where the technology wasn't necessarily something they did in their grad project, but was something else where they identified an opportunity to apply their scientific skills in another way. So how do you think about looking at founders, sort of the founder technology fit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think founder technology fit is very important. There's no one answer. Actually, I would say like everything I'm saying is not one answer, right? Like we've seen companies all over the gamut. So some of the summaries I gave were kind of just like hierarchical observations versus like companies have to be in this way. And by definition, no company is perfect, and no company really is created the same way. It does not have the exact same profile. So yeah, I mean, you definitely have to think about. We've had successes in both cases, actually. We've had a lot of people who did do their project in their PhD, and they're like, this is like my life's work, and I want to see this in the world. So obviously they have a lot of passion and expertise around that. We've had other people, actually, like Charlie and Maria, they did their PhDs in yeast genetics. And so, very basic science that was not applicable per se, but because of their knowledge in yeast genetics, that they came up with this idea that was kind of independent of their PhDs, but obviously heavily influenced by all their training. Right. And so that kind of an insight actually created something novel, something that that other people weren't even thinking about. Right. So that actually was a great advantage. 90% of our companies have at least one PhD, because we do see that, by far, we definitely have bachelor's degrees. We've actually had college dropouts. We've had also the gamut of all the different people in different degrees, MBAs, PhDs, postdocs, everything. But and we advocate that, but for certain types of technologies, sometimes you need that expertise and to come up with that insight. Right. And a lot of people working in industry too, like about a third of our companies have actually had industry experience, and then later had the insights like, well, why is everyone doing this way? Like, I think I have an idea that can improve it, right? And that kind of expertise is phenomenal. So that is something we look at, and we ask, is this something that you've studied? Or like, actually our main question is, how did you come up with the insight? Right. And it's like, what was the thing that you observed that caused you to say like, hey, this is a good idea?
Right. And you prefer people who said the insight comes from their PhD research versus I read this in an article or something? Or,
not necessarily,
Yeah.
because sometimes in the article, like it's about connecting the dots too,
Yeah.
right? Like sometimes a piece of science is not immediately applicable until it gets linked up into something else.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of like more digital companies that are more like,
Mhm.
AI with science and a blend sitting at different disciplines. I think those those are extremely great businesses too, like automation, for example, right? Like,
Yeah.
why are people pipetting all day? It's like,
Right.
why don't we build a robot for that?
Yeah.
And so I think that's actually one of the most exciting spaces, is to think about things that are at the intersections of different disciplines.
Mhm.
And so much of the co-founder thing too is like, you have to have the passion for doing this thing.
Right.
And science, there's so much science out there. They're trapped in papers, they're trapped in labs, they're trapped in a fridge somewhere, and nobody ever touches them, right? Nobody sees the potential of it, and nobody sees how you can connect that thing into a company, or nobody has the will to take that forward.
Right.
I think entrepreneurs are those crazy breeds that are like, hey, I can try something with
Yeah.
that.
And there's so much amazing technology out there, and it's just, there's so much just sitting there that people can take advantage of and put together into a company and get started. So I think that's super exciting too. So the last question on the therapeutics topic is kind of related to funding. So there were a lot of questions that in various forms were like, how do I get money for this? So there's the chicken and the egg problem of investors want data before they give me money, and I need money before I can get data. So I think IndieBio is obviously a very good solution to that, because you provide money. But after that, like how do you raise that next round of capital if you're a therapeutics company?
So I want to add that one of the money is definitely a thing that you need, obviously, to buy reagents, and everything's expensive. But one of the big things is actually the lab. Labs are extremely expensive, and I think that's the biggest barrier to entry. If you think of all your software companies, web page companies, you literally have a laptop. You can spin up an instance of Amazon Web Services. You're off to the races, and you can start booking money. You can't do that because your laptop, in this case, is $500,000 lab with all the different equipment that you might need and everything. So that's exactly why IndieBio exists. So we saw that there's a lot of great accelerator programs out there. A lot of them don't want to invest in a lab because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of money to build. And so that those programs are a little bit different because they might want to focus more on the science side or the business side and the fundraising side. We think that fundraising, to attract fundraising, you really have to start from the science. Everything is predicated on the science. So if you're not developing your science and showing de-risking movement, then it's really hard to attract money to get people to say, okay, I'll give you a shot at this idea. So that's what we really provide in that 4 months. It's a very, very intense program because our team and the teams that we work with, we kind of decide on very aggressive milestones of what needs to happen for an investor to say, okay, you have this idea. Now I can see it's slightly more real. And I can see the next level of what you want to do to make it even more real. So that kind of trajectory is what investors want to see. So a lot of investors watch IndieBio companies when they come in. They generally have very little, and their final pitch at the end of the 4 months, because that final pitch is showing kind of like, in 4 months we were able to accomplish this. We were able to accomplish this. So in 18 months we're hoping to accomplish this. Right. So that's part of what we do here, is to kind of like to get folks to first of all think about how to actually execute and move fast and figure out what those de-risking steps are that will continue on as they grow their company, and also to show investors what they're capable of as well.
So if an investor sees you with a very limited amount of money in a very limited amount of time accomplish a lot, then they're going to think, if I give you more money, you'll probably accomplish even more than that.
Right. Absolutely. Right. And also and it's not just to show that, but like it's also to get the companies into that cadence
Right.
of knowing like this is the pace that we need to work at in order to survive
Right.
really as a company, and get them focused on the right things at the right time.
Right.
Because I think another trap oftentimes in academia is there's a lot of curiosities. So it's like, oh, this is interesting. Okay, I'm gonna go here a little bit.
Yeah,
And like, oh, this is interesting. I'm gonna go here. It's like you don't have any time for that.
Yeah.
You have to figure out what de-risks your company. What is that product? What do investors want? Not just what investors want to hear, but how do you prove that this works to yourself?
Right. Right.
And I think for the founders who are curious about the science enough to prove it to themselves, because ultimately you as the founder, you're dedicating your life to this.
Yeah.
Don't you want to know that this actually works?
Yeah.
So how do you prove to yourself that this works? And
Right.
when you have that drive to prove it to yourself, that will naturally spill into that drive that investors want to see as well.
Okay, that's a really great. So I'm just trying to encapsulate all that because I thought that was a really great answer. I think so. You said just the data in itself, the de-risk of the technology, so that adds value and helps you fundraise. Showing that as a team you can execute and get things done adds immense value to convincing investors that it's a project to invest in. And then thirdly, you have the conviction that you develop by rigorously testing your science. And if you have that conviction and you're the one doing the science, you know that more than anyone else, and that's going to show through to investors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that actually brings up another kind of trap point is, a lot of times if you are very emotionally involved in your project,
Mhm.
it is your baby.
Yeah.
I do think every startup is kind of like your baby,
Yeah.
right? If the project is your baby, sometimes you can be blindsided too,
Yeah.
because you don't want people saying bad things about your baby. So, but that's a very bad mentality because you're not curious enough. You might be missing things that you otherwise you're blinded to.
Yeah.
So kind of the growth mindset, the curiosity mindset is really important. And I think that's also where like having a platform technology is great, is because if you have a single asset, then it is literally your baby.
Yeah.
And your baby could die.
Yeah.
Versus a platform, it's like, okay, this one asset didn't work. Let me emotionally detach from that
Mhm.
and come back to the platform, see how we can improve it. Let's make another asset or make some tweaks or something like that. So having that level of curiosity and then getting that feedback from investors and from customers or patients really allows you to be nimble and adapt. Because I would say maybe just off the top of my head, like 80 to 90% of our companies that come in did not become the same company going out of IndieBio or a year down the road, right?
Yeah.
Like there's all kinds of pivots, and you as a founder have to be nimble and resilient to those pivots as well, and to really have a good instinct too when to make a pivot and when to not, and to test out different things.
Right.
I think we talk about try to make original failures. Like don't fail at the things that everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what we do in IndieBio is like we tell like these are all the failure points. Don't go down these roads. Try to make original failures because
Right.
at least you're learning something. And then also try to make those failures cheap.
Right.
So go out and test them. If it's a failure, that's fine, but make sure you learn something from it and try to do it as cheap as possible so that you don't invest 2-3 years of your life and hundreds of thousands of dollars of money
Right.
to find that out.
Right. Yeah, it's much better to figure out something isn't working very quickly when you can change it rather than put off those hard questions until it's too late. And then you look back at the last few years and it's been,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's just a really good point, I think.
Yeah.
That can be hard as well. 'Cause, it is your baby. It's something you've worked on for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's it for the therapeutics questions. Looks like we have one question about the new therapeutics program. That's another good question.
Okay,
You
yeah.
did touch on that a little bit. But,
Yeah. So this is an experiment. I would actually say IndieBio has actually been an experiment. We ourselves are kind of like a startup. And so we've always been evolving and testing new ideas and trying to figure out how we can support scientists better and how we can launch these companies better. So this New York therapeutics deal is also an experiment. We are probably in this next batch hoping to fund one company up to $2 million. However, how that will work is that they will still go through our normal program. So they will have that 250K with the same equity deal that all the other companies have. They have to go through the 4-month batch. They will then, based on milestones that are predetermined as they come in, they are subject to potentially get a next set of money. And so the next set will be another 250, and that's 250K. That's to earmarked kind of for a mouse study. And then if that is successful, then another 1.5 million.
Okay.
So that's how it goes up to 2 million. But each step will have kind of they're tranched,
Right.
and they're based on, how well is this actually working,
Mhm.
how well is the team working, how well is this company is going, and then so the 250K still will be the same equity, which our equity, which I'm happy to break down at some point, but it's about 11% post seed raise because it's a convertible note.
Mhm.
And then the additional 250K and then 1.5 million will have additional their additional notes with additional caps. That the details of that have actually not been solidified at the moment,
Mhm.
and so yeah, it's going to be a little bit of experiment. The reason why we're doing this is what we saw is that 250K, while is great for a lot of the food companies and synthetic biology companies,
Yeah.
is not enough for therapeutics
Mhm.
because therapeutics investors want to see at least animal data.
Yeah.
So a lot of the so kind of the benchmarks are oftentimes we want to see mechanism of action, figuring out what is actually going on. Then you want to get into obviously your in vitro data as well. Then you want to get into that in vivo data, and then you want to get into probably kind of more GLP in vivo data.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, your first mouse study is not going to work very well, so you have to do it a few times, and that's what the 2 million is earmarked for, is to try to get you to a point where you have a very solid in vivo package in mice,
Right.
or higher organisms, depending on the topic and whether it's appropriate. So animal models showing mechanism action, efficacy, and PK/PD generally.
Okay. And I think that's awesome. I think that because you do need to do a lot of that work to get that investment round. And I think one of the things that the investors talked about last week was that you don't have in therapeutics a seed investing and angel investing ecosystem that's as robust.
Right.
So there's really this gap that it's hard to raise money for, and that's really cool that you guys are working on addressing that. And I think it's really exciting when I saw that announcement. So I'm glad someone asked about that.
Yeah.
And then I think one other thing is also I saw you were expanding your space in New York City. Is that also right?
Yeah. Well, so we're gonna clone our space in.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's gonna be a different space set up in New York City. That has not been finalized yet. But yeah, it'll be somewhere pretty central.
Okay.
And part of the idea is, especially for those therapeutics companies, that they'll be able to stay on in the lab for up to a year to complete those additional studies.
Okay. So they get extra time and extra capital.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the capital, what we've seen too, because most therapeutic work is going to be in mammalian cell culture,
Mhm.
and that the reagents are just so expensive. So
Gotcha.
even though our therapeutics companies have the same facility access, oftentimes their reagent burn is much
Mhm.
higher than other companies.
Okay, interesting. And I think that's great because I lived and worked in New York for a while, and there's all this capital, there's all this great science, but there's not really much lab space, and there's not as many entrepreneurs. So I would love to see New York grow into a really vibrant biotech startup community.
And that's part of why we're in New York, is there's so much great academic research coming out. And I think, Silicon Valley definitely kind of was created, or at the start, the biotech scene in Silicon Valley was bled from kind of the tech scene, right? Like the how do you bootstrap, how do you find these resources? I think this culture is very, very embedded here. New York is going to be very different, I think, but one of the things we're trying to do is how do you bring that ethos and that culture into new spaces like New York, and then hopefully in more places around the world.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I would love to be able to live in New York as a thriving biotech startup ecosystem. Okay, great. So looks like maybe a couple other questions. So one is related to, I think, the point about angel funding in biotech. So if you're a therapeutics company or a biotech company and you're looking to raise seed money, is there another way besides just traditional angels or seed funds? Is there like a platform like AngelList for biotech?
Yeah, so there's a couple of kind of like crowdfunding places, and there's a couple of websites that are kind of like this like angel list type thing. I haven't worked with them as much. They are a little bit not traditional, right? So I think you'll have to evaluate the equity around like how they're doing it, who the money is coming from. But there are a few efforts. I can't remember them off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some platforms like that. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I don't know too many.
Yeah, there's none as famous as AngelList, and also AngelList does host biotech companies too.
Yeah.
So there's more interest wrapped around that too.
Gotcha. Okay. Then I guess there's another one. What is IndieBio? What is IndieBio proud of in terms of metrics? We talked about a little bit of how many comes seed funded and all that.
Yeah. I guess I'm most proud of the fact that we've funded 116 companies. It's about probably like 400 up to 500 founders at this point. If each company is at least 2 founders, we've created more jobs than that, probably like 600 jobs. So for me, being as a scientist who then was able to like take the next step in creating something in the world was super satisfying, and from a career choice was definitely amazing, because I didn't want to be a PI, and I did work in pharma for a while, but I found that like the startup niche and the ecosystem and just the speed at which you can do things was way more satisfying for myself. So I'm very proud that we're able to give that opportunity to scientists as an alternative career, get them being like they're passionate about what they're doing, and bringing that passion into the world. Other metrics is that 40% of our companies have at least one female founder, which is super awesome. Obviously, we want that to be higher. We try to make sure that this is a very welcoming place and try to encourage more female founders in the ecosystem and diversity in general. About half of our companies are now international. So we have, all I think last we counted like almost 37 different countries represented.
Wow.
And then from the more monetary metrics, our portfolio is almost reaching $2 billion in enterprise value. They've raised almost $500 million in funding, and so they're growing. It's also really awesome to see companies actually shipping products. So a lot of our food companies are actually shipping. Like Prime Roots just announced that they're making these bacon that are made from fungi. So it's like a vegan bacon. And another one actually just yesterday, Endless West announced that they made molecular wine and molecular sake in addition to their molecular whiskey that they already had.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not. So I've only been, most of my work has been in therapeutics, but I've recently been doing a little bit more and meeting more people in non-therapeutics.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of questions, I guess we had to know about, like, what are the opportunities there? So I know Memphis Meats is a big, success story, but then there's also like nylon, and then you just mentioned wine, bacon, beer. So what are the other interesting applications you're seeing of biotech beyond like therapeutics, diagnostics, medical stuff?
Yeah, all over the map. So therapeutics is actually probably 20% of our portfolio. These days, we actually focus kind of 50-50 on what we're calling planetary and human health. So human health, obviously, the therapeutics, diagnostics, medical devices. Planetary health is for climate change,
right?
In generally. And so that breaks down into food, future of food, agriculture, biomaterials. We now actually have some carbon sequestration companies, a lot of like circular economy. How do you turn waste into value and, in doing so, decrease atmospheric CO2 or other things? So we see that, obviously there's so many materials in industry, both either food or either materials or or fashion. A lot of these can have major problems, a lot of in pollution and planetary harm. How can we use biotechnology to help with that? So from the food side, obviously trying to get animals out of the food supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a lot of plant-based proteins, vegan products, but not necessarily vegan for vegan's sake, but more for both human and planetary health. And then agriculture, eliminating antibiotics out of
Mm-hmm.
our food supply chain, figuring out monitoring E. coli outbreaks. We've had one that worked with bees, actually giving supplements to bees to allow them to work harder and protect them against the virus.
That's very cool.
Yeah, because that impacts our fruit yields. And ways to where you can maybe take CO2 to grow bacteria that ends up and then using that bacteria itself as biomass to feed fish for aquaculture.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another kind of a loop where you're trying to take pollutants and turn that into value to help our food supply chain. So food obviously is a big deal, and obviously something that biotech has already been very embedded with. Biomaterials is helping our oceans from all the plastics that we're throwing into it. How do we turn our convenient lifestyles into something that's actually beneficial for the world, or not as harmful, at least. And they're also looking at new materials too, like a company called Lingrove that is making kind of a flax fiber resin hybrid that looks like wood, because we've cut down like 90% of the high quality wood in the world. So if we want to make nice things in the future, we can't be cutting down wood anymore. So how do we replace that with these types of materials that look nice but are super functional, and it's actually as hard as carbon fiber and can be moldable, so you could make all kinds of furniture with this in the future. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, and actually that's another thing I want to mention, is that I think a lot of training in biotech has been heavily skewed towards therapeutics.
Yes.
But there's been times where you can see that innovations that could be used in therapeutics can actually be used for something else. So actually a great example is Geltor, a company that is making human collagen. Their fundamental technology was actually around getting bacteria to produce massive amounts of protein. So they basically found a genetic switch there that basically caused the bacteria to switch into high production. And originally, of course, they thought, well, let's use it for therapeutics because that's what is high value in the world. But in realizing and looking at that, it's like, well, actually, process development and manufacturing for therapeutics, there's so many other competitors out there. How do you distinguish yourself from that? Well, why don't we pivot you into actually making a product that doesn't exist in the world, that is high, that can be very high value. So they decided to move more into collagen, and so they're making synthetic human collagen, which doesn't happen because right now, like gelatin, for example, are like from horse hooves, and pigs and stuff. So you're obviously not going to be making human versions of that, but you can make human gelatin for the cosmetic industry, and they've actually seen like anti-aging effects because you're like reinforcing the collagen matrix under your eyes. So there's a product where it's super high value. The industry itself was already using like jellyfish gelatin and other types of gelatin, that they now have a biosimilar that actually creates some like additional effect, which is really great. And they can make gelatin of any species, and they can make high quality gelatin for food eventually.
So this is an application now where they're selling it to like dermatologists for.
Well, they've actually launched with a Korean brand that is incorporating their gelatin into the brand. It's I forget the name. It's kind of like age rejuvenation or something, but yeah, it's already on the market and they're using it.
That's very cool. So I was going to ask a question sort of related to that about how. So if these applications of biotech that are not at all therapeutics related, but use that same technology. Do the founders typically come from labs where they're doing research for like medical applications? Do they know they want to do, cell-based meat or something like that? How do these founding teams come together around these pretty like amazing and novel ideas for biotech? Where do these ideas come from? Where these founders come from?
Yeah. All of it, I would say, is from like the individual passions of back in our second batch. And Uma Valetti was a cardiologist, actually. And after being a cardiologist for so long, it's like, well, why aren't we're always just fixing people when they already have problems. Why can't we get to the root of the problem, which is the fact that our diets are very bad. We obviously desire consuming meat, but the health implications of this is killing us. So he saw that he had this passion to cure heart disease from one step removed, and then this also had huge implications on the planet as well. Knowing that greenhouse gases and destruction of land and forests are all contributing to this. It's like, well, is there a better way? And so he ended up teaming up with a stem cell biologist who was very focused on more like the more biology of growing stem cells, who also shared this idea of what if we can make meat from stem cells and kind of bypass all these other issues. So I think a lot of people are driven by purpose and passion, and especially for the areas I think that are seemingly outside of the box. It's a lot of finding the problem and then also teaming up with the right people to solve it, and having some insight for developing that. Of course, a lot of our founders who go after therapeutics indications, they obviously have personal ties to those as well, or they just want to create drugs for the better of humanity. So one of the things we advocate, actually, and advocate for all start founders, is like to really figure out where your passion lies, and to be honest with yourself about it. And it's totally okay to say, I want to do a biotech company for money, right? Which I would argue is not the best way to get a lot of money, because it is not. You can do a million other careers and probably make more money than starting a biotech company. But to be really honest about like what is driving you, and to keep that on your mind too as you're going through the process, because it's going to be hard. There's going to be great days where everything is working, and then there's going to be bad days where everything is not working, and you have to become resilient and balance yourself emotionally around that. And the thing that really anchors you is your passion. So think if you can step back from the immediacy of a rejection from a VC or a failed experiment, and to think, okay, how do I ultimately cure this disease?
Right.
And to rethink that strategy, that will keep you more grounded and will keep you more in that growth mindset.
Yeah, just focus on the goal, not the obstacles.
Yeah. So I advocate everyone who's starting a company is like, be very clear about what that goal is for you.
Yeah. So then with respect to that issue of resilience, rejection, determination in startups, I know that that's something people don't usually, it's not the first thing you think of when you think of startups. You think of cool technology or like, being your own boss or whatever, but that is a very real part of starting companies. And I think part of the value of groups like IndieBio is you have a community around you to help get you through those. So what does IndieBio do to help founders? I mean, obviously the determination comes from within, but how do you help kind of cushion the blow that comes with a lot of the rejection?
Oh yeah, that is part of what we do here every single day is to that social support with other founders is really important. Our team also, Maya, our communications director, she leads a bunch of leadership workshops. And we've had guests come in to do leadership workshops as well. And a lot of it is kind of grounding yourself, thinking about, how are you reacting to situations? What are your insecurities around situations that are making you feel bad? So, somewhat of the like more hippie stuff around
Yeah.
Silicon Valley, but I think it's really important
Yeah.
to find that grounding within yourself in order for you to do good work
Yeah.
and to lead others and to be that example for others. So, one of the frameworks that we really enjoy is called conscious leadership. There's a book called 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. Highly recommend it. Even though it's a leadership book, half the book is actually about yourself and how do you balance those things within yourself in order to be a good leader and to set a good example. So we work through that. Of course, any companies, any of the founders, when they have any issues, our team is also very open to helping, and we talk about it too.
Yeah.
Like we talk about the darkness that you're going to go through. It's like we don't want to code it to say that you always have to present, your best out there, and I think there's in Silicon Valley there's that pressure to always be like, everything is great.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, it's like the more you open up to people and tell people like your issues that you're trying to face, the more other people are willing to help you as well. So, yeah, definitely finding people that you can trust, finding mentors, and being willing to ask for help.
Yeah.
Both from within IndieBio and then also to investors and to other experts and be like, I'm having trouble with this. Is there a way to where we can work together to get over it?
Yeah, no, that's great that you make it very conscious here, just so people know that that's something that they can talk about if that is an issue that they're experiencing. And it's also, I feel like you said earlier, the fact that so many of your companies are mission driven probably helps a lot, because you see in the press a lot about some of the bad effects of software and social media and things like that these days. But it sounds like most of the companies you're funding are mission oriented, impact oriented, not profit oriented as well, because you need that to fund the work,
right?
But really kind of mission driven first and foremost. So that's really cool. I didn't realize the extent of all the different applications that you guys were doing, and the planetary health angle is pretty cool to me as I'm mostly a therapeutics person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, so my background's more in therapeutics, but with kind of the last 2 years of all the projections and everything about climate change, kind of realizing if we don't do anything about climate change in the next 10 years, well, that's going to impact everyone's health on the earth, right? So in some ways, climate change is something that needs to be addressed for human health.
Yeah. Let's do a quick time check here.
I have 6 minutes.
Oh, wow. So this is going to go quickly. Okay.
Got more questions.
Let's see. So I think the question about applying to therapeutics before reaching proof of concept, I think we touched on that earlier.
Yeah.
If you just want to
maybe we can definitely take a look at companies that don't have proof of concept. Actually, yes, maybe like half of our therapeutics companies were more just like paper and pen plans, but they were of course very good plans. And I was talking about a little bit about the platform aspects of these companies. So yeah, we're have technology than a single lead asset or a single target.
Then I take a question from Valentin. Valentin, he actually helped me with some of my website design a few months ago too.
Cool.
But, so that's a good question. I was going to ask that one as well, but it's basically about to make this happen, make these technologies go mainstream. What are the bottlenecks?
Make for especially planetary health kind of technologies. Yeah. The food aspect actually, I think, took off way more than we thought it would, especially like the cell-based and the plant-based. I think a lot of that was just also being at the right time. That one thing that you're seeing is that millennials now are having more buying power, and they are more conscious about where their food comes from, where their materials come from, and now they have the money to back that. So that's actually been a really powerful trend. As much as Facebook influencers, Instagram influencers are concerned, but that's actually a real economic shift that we have to lean into. So we're actually really excited, and the fact that people are so conscious about this, it's kind of the idea is already distributing itself. I think even like a year ago, I thought that everyone's dinner table conversation is like, hey, would you think about that lab grown meat? Would you eat that in the future? Right? Like the ideas are so kind of viral by itself, and it's something that everyone is interacting with. I think the part that becomes challenging is when you start working in areas where people are not interacting with them, right? So then you don't have that consumer consciousness at times. So at times it's interesting to like think about like business models of like how do you tap into consumer consciousness. There's a lot of kind of status symbol things now, like people want to be eco as almost a status symbol. So how can you capitalize that into helping to steer the change? We think a lot about like carbon sequestration, for example, and like bioplastics is like, do people want to pay premiums? Like, how do you even commercialize carbon sequestration? Who wants to put money into just capturing carbon? So we're thinking a lot about like, how do you turn carbon credits into something useful? How do you turn the CO2 that you're collecting into something that then you can sell? So kind of, generate, going from waste into value. So I think those are all that's kind of where we're sitting right now. And every company is very, very different based on their parameters, their technology, and the markets that they're trying to go into. But I think it's very fun and creative to like be at this place in the world right now where we have all these opportunities and people are able to try these new things.
I don't think there's ever been like a big consumer market for biotech products like this before.
Where
you're going straight, you're making stuff in the lab out of yeast or something, and so that's really exciting. I would love to ask more about that, but we only have a couple of minutes, so I want to ask you more about IndieBio.
Okay.
So can you just talk a little bit about the program? We talked about it already, but as a quick sort of overview of what IndieBio is and how you help founders.
So the program itself is an in-residence program. It's 4 months. You come to San Francisco in this office. Our office actually is down in the basement, but there's a full microbiology cell bio lab, also some hardware space. And the companies, we want at least 2 co-founders. More people, the better. If you want to hire people, that's great too. To work on the science, work on the business, and then we have additional programming to help with all of this too. So on average, I say each week we have almost every day we have some kind of formal touch point with our team. So it'll either be a business session, a science related session, a leadership related session, but then we also have like simulated board meetings. So that's where the company talks specifically to the IndieBio team. So it's like a half-hour session to kind of get all the updates and see how we can help. And then we also have something called Killer of the Week on Fridays, where we go around the whole room and every person in the room talks about their biggest wins for the week.
Nice.
And so it's like a friendly competition. You're cheering everyone else on, but it's a great way to stay updated across what everyone else is doing successfully and not successfully to learn from everyone else. So ultimately, I think the value of what we created is the network. So both the network within the batch who become their own social support, and best friends in these cases that are really like learning from each other. And then, of course, our alumni network that also has gone through the IndieBio process, and now are going off and raising Series A, Series Bs. We always tap our alumni network to come back and talk to and teach the new class as well. And then, of course, the mentorship network and VC network that we interface with as well. So it's definitely, IndieBio is as strong as its network, and like we thank everyone who has been involved, who has been to our events, who have helped and chatted with these companies. That it definitely takes a village to raise these companies.
Yeah, and so the next batch. When is the next batch for IndieBio?
The next batch actually starts early April. And so we are deep in interview season right now.
Okay. Can people still apply, or is it too
absolutely
late?
Yes. If you have something ready to go and you think you want to start in April, please hit me up. Like right now. Yeah. But yeah, and I'm also happy to have conversations if thinking like 6 months out for the next one as well, or potentially for New York as well, which will be more like May.
Okay. And I can put whatever contact information you want in the description of the video.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, and it looks like noon exactly here. So do you have any final words or how people can get in touch with you or anything else to wrap up?
You can email me. My email is jun.axup@sosv.com. SOSV is Sam Oscar Sam Victor, if my enunciation's not clear. And basically, keep. I think scientists can make a huge impact in the world. We were talking about like resilience before. I think the reason we think that scientists make great entrepreneurs is that during your PhD, you are already trained with some of the most critical skills for science, for doing a startup, which are problem solving, quick learning, resourcefulness, and resilience. And so like I want to say that you as scientists, you already have the skills to start a company, right? Like starting your own lab is like starting a company. It is, a little bit different, and there's some things you can learn, but those are all things that you can learn very easily and you can pick up. So there's countless examples now of scientists making this transition into entrepreneurship. So be brave, take that step, and kind of get yourself out there and keep experimenting, right? Everything you do, every little business meeting that you have or conversation with the VC, use that as an experiment to learn. And so stay curious, and that's how you'll build a company.
Awesome. Well, that's a good note to end on, I think. So thank you again, Jun, for taking time to join us. This is awesome. I learned a ton. And thanks to everyone for joining on the live stream. And this will be posted on YouTube as well if you want to watch it again. All right. Well, thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.